Guys, it is hot, and I've decided that I'm not going to try to hold my hair down today. It's just going to have to blow in the AC. I'm also wearing somewhat of a not so summery top, but I had an appointment today, and the doctor's office was really cold. I wasn't having it. So today I'm going to talk to you all about Matthew 25, 1 through 13, the parable where the Lord talks about the 10 virgins. 5 were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish virgins had lamps, but they did not have oil. The wise virgins had their lamps and had oil. And so at midnight, when there was a shout, they had enough oil. They started to trim their lamps to get ready to meet the bridegroom. But the foolish virgins wanted some of their oil. And they said, no, lest we give you our oil and we don't have enough for ourselves. So go buy some oil and come on. And we know the story, how it ends. They went to buy their oil. By the time they got back, the door was shut. And God says, I never knew you. Jesus says, I never knew you. Wouldn't let them in. And we looked at that, and we know that is those parables are to tell us about the sudden coming of Christ and the importance of being prepared for his coming, no matter how long it takes, to always ensure that we are prepared for Christ. Excuse me one second. I need to take this gum out because I'm doing all kinds of stuff here. Here's another perspective that I'm going to show you, and it's definitely not to take away from that. Some people may look at that and be like, man, was that truly love? The 5 wise virgins would not give any of their oil to the foolish virgins, and they lost. And they didn't get in to the wedding, to the feast. They missed the coming of Christ. Was that love? Was that malice? How was that love if you don't even share any of your oil? Well, I'm going to tell you, they were actually indeed very wise. Because they were wise is why they would not give them of their oil. Because they knew the importance that they would not have enough to make the journey, would not have enough to meet the bridegroom. There's a lot of you all today that you are, you see the oil, I'm going to give it the analogy that we always get about the olive oil and how they get that pure oil out of the olive oil. And there's a crushing process that takes place before it becomes that purified oil that we know is just so good for food, for healthy eating. It's good for the skin, so many other things. But the oil, the essence of the Holy Spirit, just having all of Christ and all the characteristics of Jesus Christ comes from a crushing of yourself to produce the oil, the holy oil of Jesus Christ, the manifestations of his character, being controlled, and not controlled, but being led by the Holy Spirit. And so there's a lot of people that don't want to do that. So here you are, some of you are getting before God. You are making the necessary sacrifices. You are letting go of things, your own heart's desires, and making God's will your will. And you are being obedient to him. And you are fasting, and you are praying, and you're doing all that he has called you to do, because you know it's about loving him with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. All of you. And therefore, what that does, it produces, there's a crushing of self and flesh that causes the oil, the essence of Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, to be in you. And that keeps you as you stay in his presence and as you continue to submit yourself to him. And then you have others that don't want to do any of those things. They look on the outside like they're Christians, but they don't want to take the necessary and make the necessary sacrifices that it takes to produce that oil that will sustain them. So what happens? They want some of your oil. Every time something happens, they don't want to fast. They don't want to pray. They don't want to let go of the things that God is telling them to let go of. They don't want to be obedient. So when they run out, they want your oil. And then you're giving them your oil. Because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Because that's love. So you're spending time praying for this brother and this sister. You're spending time going before God before this brother and sister. You're going to God. You're going trying to encourage them every time they're down. Because they have no oil. They don't want to do what it takes to have that oil, to have that reserve when it's needed. So you are giving them your oil. Some of you are doing that in ministries. You're being worked down to the husk. So you're giving of your oil. You're giving of your oil. There are people around you, toxic people, that they're doing stuff, and because you feel like you're supposed to forgive and you're supposed to love and you're supposed to have long suffering, you're giving them your oil, and before you know it, you have nothing for yourself because they have nothing to give you. You're just giving out of your reserve, out of what God has given you. But I'm here to tell you that it's time to use wisdom. Those virgins, those 5 virgins didn't do a last act of unforgiveness or one last act of hate. The 5 wise virgins did not do one last shysty, shady thing before they went in. They used wisdom. They knew that they could not give them that. Otherwise, they too might miss the groom. And so you have got to understand that being a Christian and being saved still requires wisdom. Everybody knows how 2 things: toxic Christians and unsaved people, people who don't know God. 2 things they know off the top, and they'll tell you. They know about love, and they want to tell you about forgiveness. Okay? Well, yes, you're supposed to have love, and you're supposed to have forgiveness. But you have to use wisdom. Having love for you, loving you as Christ has commanded us to love and have forgiveness, does not mean I give you my reserves. It does not mean that I give so much to you. I forgive you so much. I give so much of myself to you. I give so much of my ministry, of myself to your ministry. I give so much into your toxic behaviors that I have nothing left inside of me, and I myself be left behind. I myself miss the bridegroom. Because I'm giving you of my oil, because you made choices and decisions, and you continue to make decisions where you don't have anything in you. Love, my brothers and sisters, those of you that are being wise, those of us that are sitting and making those sacrifices now and getting before God and crushing the flesh and allowing God to have that oil within us. It is not for you to use that on people who choose to be dry bones, who choose to live dry bone lives. And they want to come to you to pray for me, sister. Pray for me, brother. Counsel me, brother. Give me sound wisdom, brother. Talk to me again about what you talked to me about last week. And you're giving and you're giving and you're giving, and you have nothing for you. You too have your own battles to fight. And I'm not saying that we're supposed to leave anybody behind, but what they have to do is get to the place of getting connected to Christ so that they have oil within themselves. They have some reservation. They have the Holy Spirit in them to sustain them so that there can be a fair exchange one to another. A fair, you can both encourage and uplift one another. What am I saying, guys? You have got to, as believers, set clear lines and boundaries. And that does not mean you are unforgiving. That does not mean that you are not a Christian. That does not mean that you are holding hatred towards anyone. It does not mean malice and you're unforgiving. It simply means you're using wisdom, just as those virgins did. They had love, they knew Christ, but they also had enough wisdom within themselves to know, I cannot give you what you yourself should have and then miss Christ. Don't lose God. Don't lose your peace. Don't lose your way to God thinking you're supposed to give of your own reservation, of your own reserves. You understand that? It's time for us to come up to a place of taking responsibility and being accountable. We're in the last days. And we can't just have a form of Christianity. You see, those ladies, the virgins had lamps. They look like. But on the inside, there was nothing. And they were not prepared. And they turned and looked at the wise one and expected, you're supposed to give me. No, no, no. Your first responsibility as believers is to make sure you are right with Christ. And while we are to encourage our brothers and sisters, and while we can labor with them, and while we can encourage and pray for them and lift them up, that person has a responsibility to get connected with Christ so that they can produce the oil that would keep them in these last days and not drying you out. Know the difference. All right, guys, I'm out.